Hi, I'm Michael Caju.
And I'm Adee Caju, and you're listening to the WAG podcast. This podcast is about health, wellness, and personal development.
Each episode is a short conversation between Adee and I on a single topic with actionable steps. We cover everything from food, mindset, fitness, and relationships.
We started WAG because of the way health and fitness changed our lives, so we hope to share a tool or two that helps you along your way. Welcome back.
Hello.
Hey, Michael.
Found a way to slip my hello in there. So.
Yeah, always with the hellos. Hey, listeners. Today we have a really fun topic. We are going to be answering one of your questions. For those of you that don't know, we collect people's questions for this podcast. We're going to play the question and then answer it. So this is our way of starting a conversation directly with you. If you have something specific that you want us to answer, head over to workingagainstgravity.com/podcast. And then if you scroll down, you'll see an area that says start recording. Click that. Do exactly like Damien, whose question we're going to answer on the show did. Say your name, where you're from, and ask your question in a quiet room preferably. And then we'll play the question on the show and answer that. So thank you, Damien, for submitting your question. And before we play Damien's question, we want to thank you guys for being a part of our show and listening, and all of our weekly listeners or people that are participating all the time. We really, really appreciate it. So if you love this show and you want to pay it forward to us, we would absolutely love if you took the time to give us a review. That makes us feel good, and it also helps us reach more people and keep doing this podcast. So thank you.
And let me just say that you are quite distracting right now. You're looking super hot.
Stop.
I just had to get that off my chest.
Oh my gosh.
Okay,
God.
Keep going. On with the podcast.
Okay, so to start, we are going to play Damien's question for you.
Adee and Michael, this is Damien from Utah. I'm a longtime fan and listener and love your guys' stuff. My wife and I are about to have our first child, and last week we were talking about parenting style with food. What are your tips for raising kids with healthy relationships with food? Oftentimes, food is used to console for injuries and crying with kids, which could be why many of us in our youth and older years turn to food when we are hurt emotionally or physically. I'd love to hear your perspective on how we can properly raise children with a good relationship with food.
Thanks, Damien. Congratulations on your family. And I'm super excited about this question today because it's been something that we've been talking about for probably the past year. Michael and I are, maybe me more than you, but I am definitely, no.
Oh.
Wait, let me finish my sentence. Maybe me more than you in terms of I love to research and plan things ahead of time. So when we decided that, we were getting close to the time where we wanted to start a family, starting our research ahead of time was really important. And this is one of those topics that we definitely dove into. Michael has the Brute Strength podcast, and he's really used that podcast as an opportunity to get some, ask some questions that we want to ask. So he's had a bunch of experts on the show, as well as asking people in our life that we really respect and love the way that they're doing this with their kids. So first I want to premise with, we don't have kids. So we are going to give you the research that we've collected from all the people in our life that we absolutely love and respect, and they are crushing it in terms of their children's relationship with food. So yeah.
Yeah, these people have, their kids are eating vegetables, they're eating meat, they're eating a huge variety of food, and they're complaining and having meltdowns very, very few and far between.
Yeah, I think also something really amazing about what they're doing is that if their kids do ask for something that we would consider an unhealthy treat, and the parent says, no, we're not having that right now, or whatever it is that they say, the kids don't freak out about it. They just understand there's a time and a place. We're also around a lot of people that their kids just don't ask for that stuff a lot, or even a level up from that. I think this example comes from Pat and Taz Barber, where they have 3 boys, and they'll have a donut, they'll have a couple bites, and then they'll just leave it. They're not super preoccupied with making sure that they get all that they can while they can. They definitely seem to be really appreciating food and not being overly occupied with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it really seems like it's something that we can train, something that we can really foster in kids, because we have a number of our friends that are doing it really, really well. So obviously there's a genetic component to like our relationship with food, but a lot of it is how we see our parents eating, how we see those around us eating, and the house that we're brought up in.
And I think it's really cool that, Damien, that you're even thinking about this, because a lot of people don't think about this early enough. And I think I'm probably a good example where my parents did not expect me to struggle with my weight. My parents didn't struggle with their weight when they were growing up. But the way that there was probably a few things that they did for me growing up, and I'm sure this is entirely individual to every single child, but that led me and my siblings, because we all struggled a little bit with our weight, to become preoccupied with food, to have not a great relationship with food. And I was really overweight when I was 16 years old, and I had a terrible relationship with my body. So I think that it's really cool that you're even thinking about it. So I'm pretty pumped to dive into this topic.
And before we get into some of the strategies, I think it's really important to say that at the end of the day, you aren't in control of your kids' relationship with food. You can sort of nudge them in a certain direction, but just like with anything in life, we have to let go of the outcome. If we get attached to needing them to have a certain relationship with food and needing them to eat certain foods, then we could be really setting ourselves up. You could be setting yourself up for a lot of heartache and frustration. So you can take these strategies and just sort of let go of the necessity of the outcome.
Yeah, if you're so personally attached to what it means about you or what it means to your identity, if your child struggles with food, then it's going to be really difficult for you to actually see things clearly. It's at the end of the day, you just aren't in control of their relationship with their body and their relationship with food. And there's a lot of aspects of your children's lives that are just completely outside of your control, like who they hang out with and the types of foods that they're eating when they go to friends' houses. Like, I'm sure you can be in control of that to some degree, but at some point you're not going to be. So this is just, these are strategies to help, create a solid foundation, but it's not necessarily a solution. Or going to avoid problems.
Okay, so let's get into these. So number one, you just help this woman work through in a workshop. You want to talk about this one?
Yeah. So number one is to not make things a big deal. So when he talks about this woman in a workshop, she came up to me after I gave a talk and she said, my 10-year-old daughter has, she's saying things about her body and she's noticing the discrepancy between myself, and I'm really into fitness and health, and herself, where she's struggling, she's a little bit overweight and she's struggling with food and she's eating a lot of junk food, whatever was going on there. And she mentioned to me something as a side comment. She said her 10-year-old daughter comes up to her and says something like, I need to start a diet. And the mother's reaction was, oh my gosh, you don't need to start a diet. You're too young to have to start a diet. And she kind of made that a really big deal, like a really bad thing. And with children, what we've heard and we've seen is that when you make something a really big deal, it's actually calling attention to that thing. So the 10-year-old doesn't have context around the word diet like an adult does. As adults, we have this negative connotation, or like what society's done to the word diet for us, and it means this like terrible thing. And instead, for a 10-year-old, she might just really want your attention, and maybe she just is trying to ask for help, and she's saying, I need to start a diet, and that's her way of saying, I'm unhappy with the way that my situation is right now. Can you help me? And she's just not saying it that way because she's 10 years old and she doesn't really know how to say it. And she's maybe just repeating some of the things that you've said. Like maybe you say, I started a diet, and she wants to be like you. So the things that you make a big deal are likely going to be the things that your kids focus on. And that's not just with the word diet. It could be you make ice cream a really big deal, or you make sugar a really big deal, or you make something like, no, you absolutely cannot have that. Then it's just natural to pay attention to it more. You can't have it, but so you're like, oh, I can't have that. But eventually you're like, you're thinking about it more.
Especially in kids. Like the thing that we can't have, we want most. I've still got a lot of that in me.
Yeah. So, or if you're a really like square and straight and narrow kid and you're just like really going to comply at a certain point, that might break when you don't understand how to moderate yourself around those things. So, just tip number 1 was things that you make a big deal or things that your kids are going to pay attention to more.
And sort of piggybacking on that, praise them for every little step they make in a positive direction. So whatever their goals are or whatever kind of behaviors or relationship you want them to have with food, every time they take a little step in that direction, praise them, thank them, celebrate. Human beings are just like dogs. We talk about this all the time.
Behavior shaping. Yeah. I said training once, and then someone DM'd me on Instagram saying that training is not a nice way of describing it with humans, and that instead we're supposed to call it behavior shaping.
Hey, I like that. I dig that.
Behavior shaping. And on top of that, it's like goes back to the beginning. You're not in control of how your kids feel about food and how your kids feel about their bodies. So instead of trying to say, no, you don't need a diet, you're perfect just the way that you are, is you basically trying to tell your child how to feel. And they need to learn how to feel for themselves, because if they don't get the skills to be able to moderate their own feelings, then that's just going to be more and more difficult for them as they grow up.
So it's create a lot of problems.
Exactly. So instead, being curious about it. What does that mean that you want to start a diet? What does that look like? What do you think, asking questions, and maybe that will encourage them to have a conversation, and you can learn about things instead of making them wrong for even asking the question. And exactly what you're saying. You're not in control of whether your kids love their body or not, but you are in control of praising them for the behaviors that might help them become better with their body and have a better relationship with food. So if you see your daughter eating making her own meal and she's eating vegetables, you can be like, wow, like how awesome. What made you, ask questions about it. Like pay attention to them, because really your kids just want attention from you. So if you give them attention when they're doing things that you want them to be doing, then they're going to probably do more of that.
Love it. Number 2 is, and this is really intuitive, but we need to have a little conversation about it, is lead by example. Kids do what you do, not what you say. And this is true in just about any different behavior. Maybe a little bit less in food, but it's certainly still there. If you are eating in front of the television every night, your kids are probably going to eat in front of the television. If you're eating really quickly and not paying attention to your food, they're going to have that same habit with their food.
If you're taking multiple servings of a meal, whatever you're eating, if you're eating things that you don't want them to be eating, they're going to do what you do, not what you say. Another thing that we learned from the barbers as well, Taz is really big on, she wants to eat only the things that her kids can eat as well. Like she'll try not to eat things that she doesn't want her children to eat. And I think that that's a really great filter to at least have, because as an adult, you probably have built more and more skills to be able to moderate your intake. So you can have maybe a little bit of ice cream and not be overwhelmed, or maybe you can't and you are showing them that behavior, but they don't. So they might not be able to have just a little bit. They don't have the skills to build up that way. So, when you do have a little bit, they can have a little bit too. And they can watch the way that you're doing it. I think that that's really great way to learn.
And if you're listening to this podcast, then you're probably already really intentional about your nutrition. And so just use the fact that you have kids as even more motivation to pay attention to your own habits, your own emotions when it comes to food, and continue to just build better habits. And that's the best that you can do.
Yeah.
So number 3 is something hilarious and awesome at the same time that we learned from one of our mentors, John Berardi, who owns or co-founded Precision Nutrition, one of the biggest nutrition companies in the world. And it's that it's okay to lie to your kids sometimes about food.
Yeah, he does the funniest things. We hung out with him for a couple days last year, and he does some funny things. There's this moment where your children start to develop their own independence and their own personality. They realize that they are separate from you. They can have a different opinion from you. And I think it was like around 2 years old that your kids just get into this no phase, the why phase and the no phase, like the why, like why over and over and over again, and then no, because they realize they can say no. So it would be a meal and they would be having steak, and then one of his kids only wanted chicken. And He really only wanted chicken, and he's like, no chance I'm going to have steak. So he just said, this is chicken. This is brown chicken. Pork is pink chicken. This is regular chicken. And so he just, every single type of meat became chicken, and the kid would eat it.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't know. And they're really, what I noticed from that is that his son was really just exerting his independence. Just, I want to be able to make my own choices. I want to be able to choose for myself instead of just do whatever my parents tell me to do. And that's a really good thing. Like, you want them to be able to become independent and make their own decisions, but you also want them to eat healthy and not become super picky eaters.
Mm-hmm.
And he does things like that with, what was the other one? It was like avocado.
Avocado is green ice cream.
Mm-hmm. So they put avocados in the freezer, and then they say, do you want some green ice cream? And they say, yeah. And they take out an avocado from the freezer, and the kids are just eating the avocado like it's green ice cream. I think it's the cutest thing. There were other things like they don't want to eat any vegetables. And he's like, that's not a vegetable. It's a red pepper.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just kind of convincing them. At a certain point, your kid's going to catch on.
Right.
Like, they're going to get old enough where they understand. But at least by that point, they're having tried those foods or having eaten them, and maybe they realize that they really do like them.
Mm-hmm. So number 4 is something that, and all of these are obviously just like, take what works for you and then leave the rest.
Mm-hmm.
But this one really resonated with me, that John and his wife Amanda do. If they've cooked some food and the kid is just refusing to eat, then that kid just doesn't eat. And what they found is that the kid never goes more than like half a day without eating. At some point, they just eat whatever the rest of the family is eating.
Mm-hmm.
And I see this happen all the time. And I want to be so compassionate to parents, because I understand it has to be so difficult to hold your boundaries when kids are late for school, you've got work, and
they probably misbehave too when they're hungry. Like, they're just being irritable, and you kind of want to feed them whenever they're hungry for yourself.
Right,
like,
right. And they're screaming.
Yeah,
and it's got to be miserable at times. So
yeah.
I totally understand that this is not always possible, and it's definitely challenging all the time.
And we'll check back in when we're going through this,
right.
because we have not been through this. And this one is definitely a little bit of like, I have moments where I'm like, could I really do this?
Right.
But I also do see the benefit of, we've made food and it's dinner time right now. You haven't eaten in a while. This is your chance to eat, so you have to eat.
Mm-hmm. And over time, John, and I think we've heard one or two other people do this. Over time, they just stop playing that game. They just stop saying, I'm not going to eat that anymore. Mm-hmm. And I think in general, as parents, we'll have kids one day. We need to be firm in our boundaries as much as we can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
As difficult as it may be.
And the moment you break them, it's like you give an inch, they take a mile. Mm-hmm. So really, really hard to do. That one is still TBD because we don't have kids.
Yeah, no judgment if you're struggling with that one.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like if I had a 2-year-old that was just shrieking at the top of their lungs because they were hungry and we had dinner, it would be very hard for me not to make them food. Mm-hmm. But there is an aspect of it too, like we've seen a lot of kids where we've been around them and they don't eat at dinner, and then later they're like, I want a grilled cheese, or I want macaroni, or I want French fries. And they just like get what they want when you make food for them later. So I think there could be maybe a happy medium of, this is what we made for dinner. This is your choice of what you get to eat. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you
can have anything you want as long as it's brown chicken or pink chicken with red peppers.
Yeah. So I think all of this is probably on a case-by-case basis for that child and their situation. Like maybe they get really emotional if they don't eat, so you really do have to make them food at other times. But just things to ponder around in your head and think about, try it on, see if it works for you, and if it doesn't, then let it go.
Mm-hmm. And the fifth one is something that you've really taught me, is that you should not use food as a reward
or a bribe. So a lot of times it's eat your vegetables and then you can have ice cream. Or you can't have any dessert unless you finish a lot of your meal. Positioning sweets or foods that you want to be moderated as a reward for doing something, or like bribing kids, like if you come with me, we'll go get ice cream, or using that. It's like, if I do good things or I do what you say, I get to have treats, or I get to eat. It kind of puts this like attention on the food that you don't want them to be eating in a way that, you're trying to get them to do something you want.
You're conditioning them as that thing is only good.
Yeah, exactly.
It's for celebrating. It's for when I do a good job.
And it kind of goes along with, I think it was Stephen Guinea.
Yep. He wrote The Hungry Brain.
Yeah, what did he say about birthdays?
So this is pretty extreme, but they do not, I don't think he gives his kids or kid cake on the birthday because they don't want to associate highly processed carbohydrates with celebrations like your birthday.
Mm-hmm. So it's just kind of another example of conditioning that when something really amazing happens, it always leads to some type of unhealthy or calorie-dense food, which amazing things happen in life all the time. So especially as kids, you could be achieving things frequently, very quickly, all the time. So that is definitely another TBD one because there is some benefit, of course.
There's no way you're not giving your kids cake.
I mean, there's just I would want to cook them an amazing meal on their birthday and celebrate them. I just don't know.
Things to think about.
TBD, just something to think about.
Awesome. Damien, hopefully this was helpful. Just to wrap up, number one, don't make things a big deal that you don't want to draw attention to, and praise every little step they take in the right direction or positive direction. Lead by example and really pay attention to your own habits. And number three is it's okay to lie sometimes to your kids. Call avocados green ice cream. See how that works?
Yeah.
Try to hold boundaries. And if they don't want to eat what you've cooked, then see how long they'll go until they cave. And number five is try not to use food as a bribe or a reward.
Well, I hope that was helpful. We will keep you guys updated as we, in the years to come, try and implement these strategies. But this is just a collection of things that we've gotten from experts and people that we highly respect. So hopefully that was helpful.
Peace.
Thanks for joining us. Stay in touch by signing up for our newsletter at workingagainstgravity.com or on Instagram at workingagainstgravity.
And don't forget to subscribe to us on iTunes, leave us a 5-star review, and refer a friend. We'll be back next week with another episode. Talk to you then.